Well, I'm back in the hot tub, giving you a progressive interpretation of modern conservative views. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit differently. I'm going to relay an experience I had in a pub in the UK, specifically in Harwich. I visited Harwich for an overnight stay, where I then took a ferry over to the Hook of Holland. And while I was there, I had quite a few hours to kill. I met this adorable couple in a pub. One of the interesting things that they brought up was that they had an experience in a house that they stayed in on vacation. They told me that they felt a presence in this house, that more than one of them felt this, and they said that it was a ghost. The nice lady told me that she actually saw a ghost. So she was sleeping in bed and she looked down at the foot of her bed in the middle of the night and she saw an apparition. The gentleman said that he didn't see the ghost, but that he felt the presence and that there was a draft in the house whenever they felt this presence, so they would get cold. They brought this information to me as a test to see what I would say. We had just been talking, as I said, about morality and how morality can be a science and that we should treat morality as if it is a science. They were intrigued by this, but they wanted to sort of bring to me some kind of test to this. Now, seeing a ghost isn't really moral or immoral. They weren't really on topic. I brought it back around to the moral discussion through the lens of honesty. I said to them, well, you said that you saw a ghost, but the honest answer is that you don't know what you saw, because ghost isn't an answer for anything. We don't know what a ghost is. Now, it's true that there's a definition for ghost in the dictionary, and it's just the common use of the word, but we've never verified that. We don't actually know what a ghost is. We've never had a little piece of a ghost to test what kind of matter it's made out of. Ghosts are visible, so they must be reflecting light off of matter into our eyes. That matter has never been tested. We don't know if, for instance, it's carbon-based or what. We also can't verify that a ghost is a spirit of a person. The word spirit doesn't have a good definition, so we don't know what that is. And nobody has ever determined that a ghost is a person as opposed to a demon or a jinn or an apparition or an animal or an angel or a god. We have no idea what a ghost is. We just have a concept of a ghost. And I explained to this adorable couple that I understand the concept, but the honest answer is I don't know, because things that are just conceptual and cannot be demonstrated are not answers to questions. Now, I said this to them, and that statement that I just made might not be 100% true. I'm not totally sure. I'd have to explore that with some nuance. But what they did next was pretty interesting. So the lady became interested. She wanted to hear more. She leaned in and she cocked her head to one side and said, okay, I get what you're saying. The gentleman, on the other hand, became angry. And he said, well, I know what I saw. What else could it be? When the lady pointed out he didn't actually see anything, he said, but I believe you. I believe what you saw. And I also experienced the same thing. When she tried to explain to him that this isn't really what happened based on what I had just said to her, he said, you know what? I'm starting to get angry. I don't feel like you're allowing me to have my feelings and my conclusions. You guys have come to your own conclusions. You guys know what you know, but I know what I saw and how I felt. And you're not letting me have that. You're not allowing me to say my piece. This is just your opinion. When I explained to him that this isn't a matter of opinion, it's not my opinion that a ghost has never been demonstrated to exist. It's not my opinion that we don't understand anything about ghosts because there are no such thing as ghosts, or at the very least, we can't say that there is a such thing as ghosts. We don't have any evidence to demonstrate that we do in fact have ghosts. We just have these types of experiences. And he said, well, what about all the other people that have had these experiences? We're not the only people. And I said, well, no, you're not. But this experience is very common, first of all, and jumping to conclusions about what exactly it was that you experienced is not honest. It's not scientific. And we were talking about morality earlier, and I said, and so the moral answer, the correct answer, is the honest answer. And it's not honest, or I might have used the word dishonest, to suggest that you saw a ghost when we have no understanding, no demonstrable evidence to suggest that ghosts even exists, or that ghosts are even possible, much less probable. Now, I said I think it's much more likely that it was an old house, so it was drafty, and that's why it was cold, that you guys felt a certain way, uneasy or perhaps unwelcome due to being in a new place. Maybe the house really wasn't set up for company all that well. If it was drafty, then it wasn't warm, and warmth is generally associated with welcoming. The other thing I said and anything that you might have experienced, none of that was actually demonstrable or verifiable. You guys just concluded that this is what happened, even though you don't have any actual demonstration that that's what it was. You felt a certain way. You assumed that it was a ghost, but you didn't actually demonstrate any of that. And as you know, your feelings can be inaccurate. You could be hallucinating, or you could have audio hallucinations, or you could be thinking of something that you saw on TV. There's a lot of reasons why you thought this was a ghost, and there's a lot of reasons why nobody should really take that seriously because you can't demonstrate that. Now, the lady was completely engulfed in this. She was on board. She was like, okay, I get it, and she wanted to talk more. The gentleman became upset again and angry and got up and left. He said, well, I'm going to go have a cigarette. And by the way, everybody in Harwich smokes, and they all roll their own cigarettes. It's like you're back in the 1800s. As the gentleman left, the lady kind of looked at him and sort of hand waved him away. And while he was gone, she talked a little bit about how he doesn't mean anything by it, but he is a little more lenient with reality. And she didn't use those exact words, but my estimation of him, and she didn't confirm all of this, but when he came back, he confirmed some of this, is that he's sort of questioning reality in the way that people in the United States are questioning reality. So he's kind of flat earthy, he's kind of QAnon, he's kind of into conspiracies, but not to such a degree that he is forcing other people to be confronted with it as people do in the United States. He's not trying to convert me, in other words. He's just sort of generally says things like, well, I don't know about that, or I'm not sure about that, or, well, we're not sure that that's really what happened, or, sort of this wishy-washy language that we hear a lot of the times from people that are into the anti-science, anti-climate change, anti-reality, conspiracy theory groups. The lady had mentioned to me that this was putting a pretty significant strain on their relationship, and that she was pretty seriously considering moving on, even though they had been together for a long time. She had mentioned that this conspiratorial thinking, and then also the flat earth stuff and the science denial, was starting to wear. And she wasn't the nicest to him, like they were together, but they were a cute little couple, but she was very critical of him, and he didn't like that. And then when I used the word dishonest, this seemed to piss him off. And I understand why. Now, the gentleman returned a little while later, and we started in again. He wanted to start in again. He wanted to be justified, or at least he wanted to be recognized. When he left, he was saying, I don't feel like you're allowing me to have my feelings. He wanted us to give him this pass. And he brought up the shape of the earth. I had brought up flat earth as an example of how people jump to conclusions despite evidence, or in the lack of evidence. He had, like I said, sort of this wishy-washy, well, I don't know, or what if, or maybe we're being lied to kind of language. And when he came back to the table, he jumped right back into that. Now, this was the thing that the lady had said she really didn't like. And so she became visibly annoyed. But he and I jousted back and forth for a little while. He brought up the shape of the earth. He brought up that we're not 100% sure about what it is. And I started talking about heliocentrism. I started talking about the models that we have that demonstrate that the earth is a sphere, or it's spherical, that the sun is the center of our solar system, and so on, that all the physics, all the mechanics, all the mathematics, all of everything demonstrate to us the shape of the earth, but also the organization of our solar system. Now, during this back and forth, the lady was a little bit quiet, but she was starting to really show signs of being annoyed. And she got so annoyed that she just ended the conversation. She just said, all right, I've had enough. Let's go. And she was kind of dragging him out of the bar and scolding him as they went. Now, it was very strange to me because when they stood up, the gentleman shook my hand and I said, it was very nice to meet you. And he was very gracious. And the lady actually came in and kissed me. Now, I don't think this is a European thing. I'm not familiar with British customs, but I'm pretty sure Brits don't kiss people generally. And for her to just lean in and kiss me and say thank you, and she was so gracious, but that was a surprise. And I think it surprised him too, because he looked at her like she was crazy, and then they left. And she was kind of smacking him around a little bit as they walked out of the bar. I think she was really embarrassed that she was with somebody that even thought this way. And I think she was also a little bit embarrassed that at the beginning of our conversation, she was thinking this way. She was on board with ghosts, but by the end of our conversation, she was understanding my point and questioning ghosts. Now, I bring this up because this notion that I know what I felt is very conservative. It's probably a vestige from a time that harkens back before science, when most of us had to figure out the nature of the world based on fight, flight, or freeze responses. So we would hear something or we would see something move, and immediately we would assign some sort of danger to that because we survive by assuming danger and then seeking shelter, as opposed to ignoring danger and getting eaten, right? If you're wrong, you die. If you're right, you survive. And even if your survival is based on a wrong or incorrect interpretation of whatever is stimulating you, you still survive. So good for you. Now, it's very conservative for people to just say, this is what happened. I saw a ghost. I know what I saw. And it doesn't matter what you say after that. It doesn't matter that I can't demonstrate it. It doesn't matter that we don't have a good definition of what a ghost is. It doesn't matter that none of that's been verified. And it doesn't matter that ghost isn't a sound conclusion to any question or riddle. But this is incredibly common. I've had multiple conversations with people. In fact, one of my former roommates, who, by the way, was educated at Duke University as a chemist and works as a scientist in chemistry. He was absolutely convinced that because from time to time, the shower curtain and rod in his bathroom would fall down, he was absolutely convinced that the house was haunted. He walked me into the bathroom, showed me the fallen shower curtain and rod, and said, well, what else could it be? When I suggested to him that perhaps gravity and moisture making the tiles slippery, gravity, making things fall downward, could account for why it would fall, and randomly, he gave me a look, and his face contorted in such a way that I might as well have said something just so outlandishly ridiculous. He was questioning my sanity. And he said, really? Really? You think gravity did this? And he scoffed at me. And he picked up the shower curtain and he put it back on. Now, I watched how he reinstalled the shower curtain, and I noticed that he didn't do the final step. He expanded the shower curtain and twisted it to lock it, but he didn't untwist the very end that adds all the tension to the rod. And I said, hey, you didn't do that last part. And he goes, what part? He wasn't familiar with this shower curtain rod. And I untwisted the very end. And I said that there's a little bit of play there. That's how you add tension to the rod. So maybe it's falling down because of gravity, water vapor, and the fact that you're not expanding it and tightening it. And he kind of looked at me skeptically and he was like, okay, but he was not convinced. He was still fully on board with this idea that a ghost was in my house. And for some reason, it was knocking down the shower curtain and rod. This is the kind of thinking that conservatives engage in on a regular basis. And this is the kind of thinking that people that aren't conservative but have conservative thoughts engage in on a regular basis. It's not sound thinking to just assume that a ghost did it. It's always best to start with the science if you have a question about anything. If you're trying to determine the nature of reality, what causes things to happen, what's real, what's true, start with the science. Gravity, water vapor making tiles slippery, not using the tension functionality of a curtain rod, or in the case of the adorable couple from Harwich, hallucinations, just being groggy, a drafty old house, not feeling welcome because it's not your house, you're in a new place, and sometimes new places make you feel a little uneasy. These are easy conclusions that can be drawn based on evidence and demonstration, and jumping to conclusions that ghosts are actually real and that's why things are happening around us is a mistake. And it's a mistake of massive proportions because it doesn't end at ghosts. As soon as you're used to doing this with ghosts, You're going to be drawing the wrong conclusion for a multitude of issues in your life. Perhaps you think your prayer's being answered, or perhaps you think that things are happening for a reason, or you're part of a greater being, that there's something higher than you, or perhaps you're thinking of something else that is equally unsound, invalid, and cannot be concluded from the evidence we have. Now, this adorable couple from Harwich didn't cause a crisis in Britain because of how they voted. Although the lady did mention that she did not vote for Brexit, and the gentleman, he suggested that he did. They were very clearly arguing, this couple, and they were, by all accounts, adorable. But there was real stress on their relationship. So the problem that this kind of thinking demonstrates doesn't have to be on a national level like we see in the United States and in Britain. It can be very personal. How can you actually have a reasonable conversation with somebody, let's say your lover, when they're seriously suggesting and kind of demanding, in the case of this couple, that their own personal belief that they can't demonstrate, that's unsound and unscientific, should be taken seriously? And if they are not taken seriously and they say things like, you're not allowing me to have my feelings and my conclusions, I know what I saw, I know what I felt, when that's not true. If somebody tells you that they saw a ghost and you say, I don't think that's true because we don't know what a ghost is, that's never been demonstrated to exist, and so on, you're not attacking them as a person. You're not attacking who they are, but they act as if you are. Their response is a personal response. It's dishonest, it's unnerving, and it's unfair. If you're just trying to stick to the evidence and to determine what happened, and the person you're trying to partner with is stuck in this idiotic mind loop that they get to dictate what is real and what isn't based on their experience, you get stuck, and it causes friction that needn't be there. This gentleman has just as easily said, you know what, that's a good point. I'm going to go and think about this. I'm going to go and do some introspection and self-reflection and determine how honest of a person I'm being when I suggest that this was a ghost. And then again, how honest am I being when, after I suggest that this was a ghost, and you bring up the fact that we don't know what ghosts are, that instead of contemplating that fact, I get emotionally upset and say, you've done something wrong. I blame you. That is dishonest. That is unnecessary trauma and unnecessary argumentation that's hurting this relationship. Think of how much better off this adorable couple would be if, instead of holding to this notion that I know what I saw, the two of them just focused on the evidence, focused on sound scientific thought, skepticism, methodological naturalism, and so on, and came to an appropriate conclusion, one that not only can be agreed on by everybody because it's demonstrable or it's fact-based, but one that doesn't cause you to feel emotionally charged. This was completely unnecessary, negative emotions and trauma and conflict based on ghosts, which can't even be said to exist, and it needn't be. There needn't be this trauma. There needn't be this grinding away between two people. If the gentleman was just more honest and the lady was just more honest to begin with, they would have determined that they don't know what they saw. They just felt uncomfortable in a new place. Now, in the case of this couple, they weren't really directing any of this anger towards me. The gentleman was very nice to me. He wasn't mad at me. He was just mad in general. And more than anything, he was annoyed with her for not, quote unquote, giving him his feelings or allowing him to have his conclusions. He wanted to equate everything to opinion, which is very conservative. But that friction is caused by conservative thought. Progressive thought that takes into account science, always start with the science, always go to demonstration, always go to evidence. Thinking in that way, skeptically, but also compassionately, leads you down a path of harmony and togetherness and humanity, humanism, empathizing with one another, working with one another, not fighting against one another. That's why progressive thought is so useful and powerful, because it leads to teamwork. It leads to consolidation and working together towards a common, understood, sound, scientifically demonstrable goal. And what throws a monkey wrench into all of that? What fucks all this up? Some conservative moron who thinks he saw a ghost. For those of you that are listening to this podcast, the audio-only version, I encourage you to go to my YouTube channel called Ear Seduction, where I have other shows that I publish. I have Paul's Passive House, where I'm converting a 1950s ranch house into an ultra-high efficiency passive house. I have a series called Urbanist Snark, where I publish video content of my travels through Europe and other places in the United States and talk about urbanism and good city design. I also have other shows that I'm planning on publishing there as well. If you like this show, please go to YouTube and check out some of my other content there.